when you already have the answers, you don't think deeply enough about the why behind it. It's only through experimentation that those bonds are formed between the conscious and the subconscious mind.
Hello, you're listening to the Leaders of Learning podcast, the podcast that explores learning in the 21st century with educators, leaders, and entrepreneurs from around the world. I am your host, Ling Ling. I'm also the director of Spark Learning Solutions, a company that supports the development of cultural intelligence and intercultural competence of leaders and organizations globally. The term artificial intelligence, or AI, has been widely used since the last century. However, it's in these recent years we have seen huge progress in the space. The term artificial intelligence is when machines mimic humans and their ways of thinking and behaving, such as learning and problem solving. In 2001, Steven Spielberg directed a film called AI, where a robot named David, in the form of a boy, had an unquenchable need for his mother's love and sought it across time. The journey of David, a lifelike robot, stirred fear and caught the imagination of audiences worldwide at the turn of the century. That was 17 years ago. Today, researchers have created robots that are advanced enough to hold conversations and express emotions. But has AI become a part of our lives, or are we still a long way to go? How will this impact us? Will AI truly take over our jobs and our learning? Joining us to answer these questions is the CEO and co-founder of Acquizen. His name is JC Sekar. Hello, JC.
Hi, Ling. How are you? Thank you for having me.
Thank you for joining us today. So what is behind the name of your company and your tagline? Tell us more about that.
Okay, I keep getting this question often. So, Acquizen, and if you look at the spelling, there's an I in between because we believe that we are in this era of artificial intelligence, but even then, we ought to keep the individual at the center of everything that we do, and the I there stands for the individual. And encompassing the individual on either side is ACU, which is acumen, which is short for acumen, and Zen, which is intuition. So acumen is intelligence, and the other side is intuition. And if you notice, there's a little bit of of a of a technology blurb over the I. So basically, what we're saying is, in the world of artificial intelligence, we still want to enable the individual with the intelligence and the intuition using technology. So that's the name of our company.
So that's why it's called intuitive intelligence as well, because that kind of fits into your company logo.
Absolutely, it does. And that's the mission, really, because we believe that part of the risks of all of this artificial intelligence all around us is the chance or the possibility that, we keep the individual, we make machines more intelligent, but we don't focus on the individual. So our mission really is to enable the humans with intelligence in such a way that they're able to compete and they're able to thrive in a world in which there's artificial intelligence all around you.
And you also called yourself a microlearning platform company. What is microlearning, or what is MLearning?
We're not entirely a microlearning platform company, even though that's probably one of the solutions that we do. So microlearning is about, it's not just taking down maybe a 1 hour module or a 10-hour module and breaking it down into smaller chunks, which most people say what microlearning is all about. But it's really about taking one learning objective. I know we're exposed to a lot of things as part of our life, as part of our career, as part of our learning. And when it comes to actually performing tasks, sometimes we struggle because we don't exactly know what we need to do. And that's the point of time at which you go to Google and try to find out exactly what this is. Now, imagine a work-related Google where, let's say I'm trying to operate a piece of equipment or I'm trying to do something. How do I know exactly what I need to do? And that's very relevant to the kind of contextualized work that I'm performing. So how do I get that right information for that particular task at the point of time when I need it? So it's about providing people with the point of need information to either perform a task or learn something or something at that point of time. So this is really breaking down, not really into meaningless chunks, but it's really about breaking it down to one learning objective, contextualized, provided to them at the point of need and in the right quantum, using possibly multimedia, because we're all so used to multimedia and we want it to be exciting. It's not about throwing a brochure at me or throwing a SOP at me and saying a standard operating procedure at me and saying, read this and find out, because we're also used to today getting stuff in nice multimedia. So this is about providing people that point of need information in nice multimedia at the point of need.
So you said microlearning is only one of your solutions. What else do you do at Acquizent?
So essentially, we use microlearning as the platform, but then around it, we build other solutions, because what happens, especially when it comes to the world of work, is today there's a lot of dispersal of the workforce. We don't really supervise people the way, supervision meant maybe many years ago, but we rely on an extended supply chain. We rely on our contractors and subcontractors to do work around us. And in many of these cases, I think we are increasing the amount of risks that we're being exposed to, because when work is being performed remotely, you don't exactly know whether it's happening the way you want it to happen. So there's a need for us to also monitor and find out exactly, is this the way I want it to be done? So our platform also enables people to perform work, demonstrate the performance, and get evaluated by people who are probably supervising you. Maybe they may be remotely placed in an office, wherever. So it's about not just learning, but it's also a marriage of learning and performance.
That sounds very much like based on your tagline, intuitive intelligence. And the topic today is actually quite an exciting area, and it's something that your company is focused on, which is artificial intelligence and human learning. For me, and maybe the majority of the people out there, artificial intelligence or AI seems to be like science fiction. Like the AI movie in 2001 by Steven Spielberg. It's been it's been so many years since then, and AI today has become a reality, or at least that's what the media says, that's what we see on the news, and so on. It's here, and it's here today. Although the concept of AI still seems to be hard to grasp. So, what is artificial intelligence? Is it Siri on our iPhones? Is it virtual reality? What exactly is artificial intelligence?
Okay, so basically, if you look at a very high level, artificial intelligence obviously is a word that's thrown around for multiple purposes. But at the base of it, what it really means is it's all about mimicking human behavior. It's about mimicking humans, not just say human behavior, but mimicking humans. So that's the large umbrella term. And within that, there are multiple things. I mean, it could be as simple as voice recognition, pattern recognition, things like that. So multiple things that you would really have as AI solutions. Now, that's the umbrella term that's being used. But beyond that, it encompasses also things like, I mean, look at this as three concentric circles where you have AI as the big circle, and within AI you probably have machine learning, and within machine learning you have this deep learning. Those are really the three concentric circles, with the deep learning being the real insight stuff, and then machine learning being the next one, and then the big one being AI. We are still, I think we misuse the term AI today quite extensively, because a lot of what we do today by way of AI is really pure data analytics, which has been around for many, many, many years. But what's changed really in the last few years is the amount of data that's being collected and the variance of the data that's being collected. In other words, you're not just collecting data from one source, you're collecting data from multiple sources, and then you're trying to piece all that together. And today you have the computing power that enables you really to essentially start dissecting the data in different ways in different ways, and thereby able to come to some certain conclusions about predicting what's going to happen here. So that's really where the bulk of the AI applications are happening today, which is really more of things like what you have in Siri and others are really all about recognizing and then having a database and then replying from the database. So it's really about processing huge amounts of data. But as we go into the next two levels, they get a little more complex, and I can give you some examples for that.
Can you share with us what is machine learning and what is deep learning? Because they both sound the same to me.
Okay, let me give you an analogy for machine learning. So let's take an example of, let's say, a barista. You go to the bar every day, and the barista, the minute he sees you, he recognizes that, okay, hey, Ling is coming into the bar, and Ling likes, this is the way she likes her drink. So he knows how to mix the drink for you. So basically what it's doing is, it's nothing but, the fact that you went there continuously every week, and then that pattern was formed, know that, this is Ling's favorite drink and I've got to mix this drink. So it's really predicting, saying that this is what Ling does. So when Ling comes, I don't have to wait for her to tell me what she needs, because I know this is the kind of drink she likes. So that's what, when it's done to machines, when it's done with machines, that's what is machine learning. It's really about pattern recognition, and then determining that if so and so is doing this, then that means when he comes the next time, I've got to do this. So that's, in very, very simple terms, what machine learning is all about. It's really not the frontiers of technology, if you will. I mean, it's been around for many, many years. It gets a little more complex when it goes to deep learning, and when you say deep learning, it's all about, again, looking at the data sources. So it's not just Ling coming into the bar today, but it's also about knowing what kind of a day Ling had today. So today Ling had a great day at work, and therefore she won a big business deal, and she'd like to celebrate today, and therefore I'm going to offer her champagne today because that's what she's going to go for. So it's about forming those connections based on others' data sources, thereby coming to a conclusion that it's not just about looking at a person and saying this is what this person needs, but it's also looking at the person, looking at other interactions the person may have had, looking at situations around you, and then coming to a conclusion. So it's about forming those the neural connections, as you will, which we'd probably do in the brain, because in the brain you'd probably have a neural connection which says that she looks very happy today, therefore I'm going to kind of give her champagne. And that, if it starts happening with data that's being processed around you, that's what deep learning is all about.
Are there some examples in our daily lives where we experience machine learning and deep learning, or objects or devices that we use on a daily basis? Because I think your analogy of the barista is really fantastic, but how does it work in terms of our day to day?
Simple things like, you have the Siri reminder system which tells you, as you leave home or as you leave work, remember to pick up the milk. Okay, that's a simple application, right? Because that's been fed in that, if this is your geotag location, and as you're passing by the store, as you're walking past the store, remember to pick up the milk, because you would have normally not forgotten. You may have forgotten that, but that's where the data is programmed to tell you that as I do this, do this. Okay, so that's a very simple example. Obviously, you also have things like scanners with optical character recognition. All of these are all, in some ways, application of artificial intelligence, because you're essentially taking some data and then taking some information data and then processing it and then bringing it in a form that makes sense to you. Learning, I would still say, is possibly not yet there. I mean, we are still exploring it, and it's mostly in an experimental state. I wouldn't say there are any mainstream applications as yet, not that I'm fully aware of. Obviously, you have Watson, which you may have heard of, and the cognitive power of Watson being significantly higher than even the best players of chess or other games. Really, a lot of it is in the R&D phase, but that's obviously scared a lot of people about what's the potential of that.
Machine learning is, like you say, pattern recognition, and it's something that we use. The most simple example is Siri on our iPhones or whatever smartphones that we carry. And deep learning is still in its R&D kind of phase. You've mentioned in an article that you've written that humans are naturally curious, and I'm just going to quote directly from your article that machines are gradually reducing the cognitive ability of man and also impacting our curiosity. So how and why is this happening?
I think the natural curiosity of men is something we're all born with. I think, the child is probably the most curious person. And it's that curiosity that really helps us form those neural connections that you have between the conscious and the subconscious mind. It's only through experimentation that those bonds are formed between the conscious and the subconscious mind to link back what you are seeing with what you potentially know, and then having that link to say, why is this happening? The why factor is something that essentially forms those neural connections between your between your conscious and your subconscious mind. Now, my fear really is, if we are not having that curiosity factor, and if we kind of are spoon-fed everything by way of somebody telling us exactly why this is happening, you already have the answers. When you already have the answers, you don't think deeply enough about the why behind it, because you already have an answer. You want to move on because you really have multiple things to worry about, and this is one less thing for you to worry about, therefore you move on. So you've not really formed that neural connection between the conscious and subconscious. So that's, I think, increasingly happening today, and which is why we need to be conscious of the fact that, if it requires us to go out and seek that information, sometimes we need to do that. It's not taking the easy way out of quickly Googling and finding the information. And going back to the generations when we needed to go to a library to find out and research information, look at 10 different books before you could come to an answer. That's not the case anymore. I mean, you need any information, you go to Google and you find out what that information is. So the ability of people to innovate really comes not from going deeper and deeper into the same subject, but it's also about the variety of information that we go through before we come to that, because it's about forming the patterns between, I may be reading a book on something, and then parallelly when I read a book on a unrelated topic, that connection that I form between the two things may really be where that innovation comes from. And I think that's something which we risk kind of losing today, because everything's being fed to us on a platter.
Isn't it kind of contradictory in a sense that you are heading up a company that does artificial intelligence, and now you're saying that if we rely too much on technology, uh, people would naturally lose their curiosity or lose that neural linking and sort of. So how do you balance that?
Yeah, which is why what we believe is that our solution should really be solutions that can enable them to form that neural connection. So we're not here to kind of disrupt the whole thing and provide people with a lot of information so that they kind of rely on us entirely, but really about how do I form that one neural connection at that point of time so that it strengthens it. And our biggest success would come when people stop using us, because what it means is that the neural connection has formed within the individual, and therefore they don't need us. The reality is today what happens is we are not going to be learning one subject and living with that one subject for the rest of our life. I think people are going to be shifting from topic A to topic B to work A to work B over a course of the career. And I mean, those neural chains do get weakened over time, and there's a need for reinforcing that neural connections over time. And our solutions are really not intended to replace a formal learning process or to replace any kind of teaching process, but it's really to reinforce this at the point when they need this, as opposed to really saying that you don't need the solution at this point of time, but you can really look at replacing it with our solution. That's not what we're trying to say. What we're saying is that yes, you need something to reinforce that, and this is where we come in. In other words, we're not really anti-technology. As a matter of fact, we are absolutely for technology, but we're saying technology has to be used judiciously at the point of need.
So what I hear is that the technology that or the solutions that you provide in terms of AI and so on is more to complement the learner's learning process rather than disrupt it or take over it or.
Yeah, to their cognitive abilities. When we say AI, our belief is that the AI should be more. And I don't even want to call us an AI company till such time we really gather enough data. But we will eventually be an AI company when we have a lot of learners on our platform who generate a lot of data, which gives us information about specific learning difficulties and things like that, which will enable more of policy-based decisions. And so our AI is not so much to the individual as is it to policymakers who know that, again, marrying the data, who know that the skills that are required for individuals who are going to go on to this particular job are ABC, and these are the areas where they need more support, and these are the areas where we need to build capacity. So we wouldn't want to use AI really for the individual as we would for a holistic policy making kind of an information or something like that.
So apart from your company, I know there are plenty of other companies who have invested into AI or machine learning or deep learning. And according to the McKinsey report in 2017, Baidu and Google spent between 20 billion to 30 billion investing in AI R&D and acquisition. So how do you think this rapid growth of AI will impact the learning industry? What do you believe will happen?
There are two things here. One is that there's a lot of learning technologies around there, and I think we again tend to mix up learning technologies with AI, because the technology space where you have technologies like augmented reality and virtual reality, they all add on to this whole technology thing, which may not truly be artificial intelligence at this point of time. I do believe that the aspect of AR and VR will obviously have a play here, because I think it helps to clarify concepts a little better, and it helps people to maybe shorten the learning cycle and the learning time. So those will certainly have a big impact. But when it comes to AI, I think the fundamental application of AI when it comes to education will probably be more in the role of personalization. So it's about looking at this individual learner, Ling, and saying Ling she has a tendency to forget this particular concept. So this is where we need more reinforcement. So the next set of questions that I ask Ling are going to be in these areas, or the next lesson that I give Ling is going to be in this area. So it's an aspect of personalization which people will be looking at. There are other mundane activities like grading and marking, and then finding out where do I need to put focus? Those could all be things that happen by way of automation or technology, or to a lesser extent, artificial intelligence.
So when it comes to technology and AI, there are some educators who believe that, like technology doesn't help the learner, and there's still a great need for human connection when it comes to education. So I've heard of instances where, educators, they require their learners to put away their devices during a classroom session. How will technology or AI impact educators who, are resistant to this advancement?
Okay, I think the educator's got a huge role to play, and I don't think that role is going to change anytime soon. But I think educators need to be conscious of what their role is. If an educator starts looking at his or her role as just a provider of information and somebody who has to go through a course material mundanely and just deliver that course material irrespective of what's happening to the learners, I think we are in for trouble. Educators need to see themselves as people who are stirring that curiosity in their learners and stirring that interest to go deeper into the subject. Or maybe to a large extent, it's all about not just giving the right information, but it's also about asking the right questions. And that, I think, is something which machines do not have the ability to do anytime soon. So if you are an educator who understands the mood of the audience and is in a position to ask the right questions and spur that innovation or spur the thinking in your people and that curiosity in your students, you still have a huge role. But if you are a trainer whose role is to come and present a bunch of PowerPoints and tick the box to say that you've completed all those slides and you've asked all the things that were described as part of your learning, as part of your teaching process, yes, I think you do have a risk. So it is about moving away from being a trainer to being a facilitator, and I think that role is going to become increasingly important when it comes to the use of technology. I'm ambivalent when it comes to this aspect of, do I need to put my handphones away when you're doing it? I think if you are a trainer or a facilitator who's making the course interesting, your students aren't going to reach for the handphone. I think the reality is that we have to recognize that with technology, the attention spans of people are decreasing enormously, and you got to be interesting at every point of time if you want to keep up the interest. So if you're a great storyteller, nobody's going to interrupt your story and look into the handphones. But if you're a poor storyteller, if you don't know how to get the audience attention, yes, chances are they'll go to something that's a little more interesting.
How can we help educators, trainers, and facilitators to embrace technology and AI in the way in their roles?
There's a lot of advantage which technology can give to educators, because I think it essentially takes away a lot of the mundane tasks that can potentially be done by technology even before they come to the classroom. Simple things like, which is already prevalent, which is things like flip learning. How do I really provide generic information or questionnaires that people can answer even before they come to class, and use the time that they come to class with more meaningful discussions and kind of around the topics that they are supposed to learn about. So how do you encourage that group learning? How do you put people into social groups in such a way that they can interact and learn from each other? So these are all areas where I think the learner or the trainer can essentially try and move away from doing the mundane tasks, even grading and things like that, offline using technology, and spend the time in class facilitating and then encouraging discussions and then raising questions. Because again, I reiterate the fact that asking the right questions is going to be a huge role of facilitators, as opposed to providing the right information or providing the information, because I think information can always be found, but the questions that need to spur the thinking in the minds of the individual is where the most difficulty is. So anything that can be automated, anything that can be potentially done at the back end using technology, whether it's grading, whether it's examinations, those things can be done with technology.
I think that is a big change in the learning industry or in the education field when you have AI and technology taking the manual kind of work and automating it. I'm sure there are educators out there who are used to the mode of sharing information, but are not yet used to changing their roles to becoming more of a facilitator and asking questions. So I believe there's a general fear, and I think it's not only in the learning industry but everywhere else, that AI and technology will take over their jobs. Do you think that's a bit of a premature to predict that AI and technology will take over jobs, or is it something that we as humanity will find a way to overcome it?
This is a topic, obviously, which is always discussed in all forums. I think the threat is for real. I don't think it's impossible to predict that there'll be many jobs that will vanish and many new ones that will be created. I have a simple thumb rule for this, which is, I know all thumb rules do have a certain amount of accuracy, but my simple thumb rule is that look at the job that you're doing today. Is this a job that can be described by a standard operating procedure? If this is a job that can be described by a standard operating procedure, my fear is that one day it can be automated. But if your job cannot be described by a standard operating procedure, I think you can rest assured that it will take a while before which technology or artificial intelligence can take over your role. And that's my thumb rule for, is this job at risk? So if you look back at some of the jobs that have been lost, which could be simple accounting jobs and simple call center jobs, these are all things where if this is a question that your customer asks, this is the answer you give. Once you start standardizing all those things, I think you're at a risk. And this is where again you go back to educators. Educators are probably one of the important roles where it may not be possible to automate a great facilitator. I can't describe an SOP for a facilitator and say this is who a facilitator is. I mean, these are skills that you build over time, and these are things which over time you really develop that ability to essentially gauge what's happening to the student. How do I do this? And you got to kind of keep tweaking your approach each time. And that's where I think an educator's role, if they move towards becoming great facilitators, is never going to be at risk.
So what do you think we can expect in the next 5 or 10 years when it comes to artificial intelligence and human learning?
I just think this trend is going to accelerate. Very simple. I think they're going to see more and more. And again, I'd like to say you'll see more technology being used, whether it's artificial intelligence, whether it's things like AR. And this is going to be an increasingly unavoidable thing. You are going to see a lot of it. What I probably see is a trend where the focus is going to shift from mere learning to learning on the job and learning performance of the person. I think there's increasingly too much focus on the provision of the information and the provision of the knowledge. And a lot of our investments today are all focused on just that delivery of the content. But that's going to shift really, in my opinion, to the performance of the individual as he goes on. In other words, the treatment of learning as an activity will kind of morph into learning as a journey, where the personalization using technology and using artificial intelligence will extend beyond the classroom to one where the support that needs to be provided to an individual in his lifelong learning journey using technology will become extensive. So I believe that if things go the right way, learning will move more from being a transaction to one that's more of a relation, where I have a connect with my trainer or my educator over a longer period of time as I get into work, and he starts also becoming a mentor to me as I work and as I learn new things, as I make my mistakes. So we believe that this is where technology has got a huge application, because I could have gone to school in a country A, and then I work in country B, but then I suddenly realized in my work that there was something which my facilitator told me in country A. How do I go back and ask him that question? So I think that connections there are where our ability to go back and look back into what we did in the past and learn from our trainers and help those trainers to really manage a performance is going to become more important. So I would say it's a shift from learning to performance.
The future of AI and human learning will be very bright, because learning will be a lot more personalized to the individual on their capabilities and on their performance, rather than using the cookie cutter method that we're using now. Thank you so much for your insight in the past half hour on AI and human learning.
Thank you, Ling. Those were some very nice questions. Thank you. You got me thinking. You're a great facilitator.
That was JC Sekar, CEO and co-founder of AcriZen. In the next episode, we will speak to Go Yat, a former banker and management consultant. Today, she calls herself a trainer, a storyteller, an artist, and an entrepreneur. We will discuss about what it takes to be an entrepreneur. If you enjoy listening to this podcast, take a moment to rate and review us on iTunes, SoundCloud, Spotify, or wherever you download your podcast. Every rating helps us build credibility and attract new listeners. This also helps us to keep making the show. This is your host, Ling Ling, and thank you for listening to the Leaders of Learning podcast.